Well, welcome everybody, both those that are joining us online and those in the room here for the annual scientific exchange for Melanoma Research Victoria. Always a highlight of our year as a collaborative group involving many participants, patients that have melanoma and their supporters, scientists and clinicians, all with a single vision to accelerate cures for melanoma. My name's Professor Grant McArthur of the Peter Mac University of Melbourne and VCCC Alliance. And can I begin this evening by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional owners of the lands, beautiful lands that we're gathered here this evening, and pay my respects to elders past and present. And also I would like to acknowledge what is a really important contribution of our First Nations people to all of our efforts in medical science, and there are many medical scientists amongst our First Nations communities. I'd also like to acknowledge the many partners and collaborators of Melanoma Research Victoria that we can still fit on one slide, which is very pleasing. This summarises our program this evening, and we're very keen to get feedback and adjust this program. We've got a format this evening that we hope you will find very engaging. We'll give you a bit of an update about Melanoma Research Victoria, and particularly hearing from Alison Button-Sloan, who chairs the Melanoma Research Victoria Consumer Reference Group. And Alison's going to walk us through and chair a hot topic debate. We, at Melanoma Research Victoria, these are not issues that are easy and low level in any way at all. We're tackling a big question tonight about the future of melanoma treatment, and that is adjuvant treatment. Will we still have it in the years to come? So hopefully you'll find that really interesting, because it is a fascinating debate that melanoma experts are just beginning now. So we thought we'd take it on and particularly acknowledge our consumer experts from lived experience who are going to ask our debaters some cutting questions, which I'm really looking forward to. We'll also be joined by Assistant Professor Eugene Semenov from Harvard University, and I'll mention when I introduce him, but he's actually getting up at 4 a.m. in the morning. He tells us that's not due to the outcome of the election, but due to the fact he's just travelled back from Europe. So we'll introduce Eugene, who's going to talk about artificial intelligence, which is just, huge at the moment in thinking about the future of healthcare. And really importantly, and something we is a real highlight of our annual scientific exchange, is the award of the Morgan Mansell Award for the Young Melanoma Researcher of the Year. Always an annual highlight, and such wonderful, talented people have received that in the past, and we'll get another very talented person will be successful this evening, but the three finalists will all be presenting their fantastic work. So that's what we've got to look forward to. There are the sun cabanas there at the front, which you're all welcome to take one home and be very sun smart. Some of us were fortunate enough last night to be at the premiere of the Conquer skin cancer documentary video, which is a film you must see. It's very hard hitting, and if you see that film, you understand the importance of using these cabanas when you're enjoying the great outdoors in Australia. So I'm going to kick off with a bit of an update about Melanoma Research Victoria. And we're at a very exciting point in the history of Melanoma Research Victoria as of today, because 4 more participants join Melanoma Research Victoria. There will be 4,000 people who have generously donated their clinical information and their tissues for melanoma research. What has been the impact of all of those people participating? Well, on average, each participant across that almost 4,000, their anonymous data has been utilised an average of 11 research projects. So what a great contribution. The other highlights this year, we've had a community survey of our participants presented at the Australasian Melanoma Conference just a couple of weeks ago, and you can see the details on social media about future research directions. And, you know, I love the change. You know, back in 2013, the emphasis was on better treatments and cures, more research. Now it's actually about access to care, how care is delivered. These issues are coming up now in the so-called health services research area, which is really, really interesting. And we're also undertaking a survey of clinical trials. There's been one clinical trial that Melanoma Research Victoria has run called Celebrate trial, looking at combination target therapy treatments. That's about to complete recruitment, so that's a real achievement. And, you know, something I think that's very important. So number of projects that our participants have contributed towards. So it's at 99. One more project, which is currently under review, will get us to 100, so another major landmark. 6 projects underwent approval amendment in the last 12 months. And I want to show this slide because, you know, our keynote speaker all the way from Harvard University in Boston this evening is an expert in clinical informatics and the emerging role of artificial intelligence in health. And it so happens that, you know, we now have a large number, or it seems like a large number to me because it's 6 projects, one still being designed, but 5 others approved projects looking at artificial intelligence in melanoma, looking at trying to predict how the immune system is going to behave in response to treatments, but also in the really important area of accurate diagnosis of melanoma, using artificial intelligence to look at particularly the histology that the pathologist looks at down the microscope to get help from artificial intelligence for very accurate diagnosis and potentially even predict how melanomas are going to behave, which is very exciting. And there's also novel AI-based imaging technologies being looked at as well. Things that are coming up, you know, we really look forward to seeing these AI projects get completed. Everything we do in the care of melanoma patients involves accurate staging of melanoma. So it's very exciting that conversations are now starting to early stages of design a new staging system, which is likely to be a lot more sophisticated. And the special thing about melanoma staging, and the American Joint Cancer Committee that oversees that, is in melanoma, but not all cancers, but in melanoma, we use data to inform the staging system rather than approximations and consensus guesses as to how staging for cancer should be classified. So melanoma, we actually look at the data and let the data tell us what the staging system should be. And so all participants in Melanoma Research Victoria are informing that critical thing for staging in the management of melanoma. And a very exciting development in the field of melanoma research is risk stratified targeted screening, because melanoma is a cancer that, if detected early, you can get better outcomes. So we're looking forward to that national program moving forward in a strong evidence-based way to ensure that there's accurate diagnosis of melanomas at an early stage, but also make sure that that's affordable for our healthcare system. So that's what Melanoma Research Victoria is up to. And so without further ado, I'll introduce Alison Button-Sloan, who's the chair of the Melanoma Research Victoria Consumer Reference Group. Thanks, Alison.
Hi everyone, thank you, Grant. I'm going to talk about, I'm also going to give a consumer update. Then I'm going to go through an initiative of the MRV team with patient self-follow-up with their data collection, and then we'll move on to the debate. So first up, well, we've been quite busy over the last 12 months, and this slide gives a broad overview illustrating the range of our activities that we've been involved in. You know, a number of conferences we've been involved. 5 of our members are actually working with researchers. We've had the researchers give us presentations. But what I would really like to highlight, and it's not here, is the work of 2 of our members, Jules McNamara, who's here tonight. She at the moment is, as well as being on our consumer reference group, she's representing consumers with the National Melanoma Nursing Program, which has been managed by MIA. And she was also a co-author of MRV's poster presentation at the AMC. And Grant touched on this a minute ago. So 10 years ago, MRV surveyed patients about what their research priorities were. And then again last year. And there's been some interesting changes in attitudes, etc. A lot of them are around now survivorship and dealing with the long-term side effects that have come with treatments. And we have a poster here tonight on the wall if you'd like to have a read of it later on and see what they found. But I'd also like to mention another member, Julia Castro. She's a member of the National Cancer Cohort Project Consumer Working Group. Now, the NCCP, as it's called, has several cohort partners, including MRV, and they're building a new digital asset to optimise real-world data to drive future cancer care and research. So my last point, I've mentioned AMSCA, and I just want to touch on that now. Probably most of you aren't aware of AMSCA. So the Australian Melanoma and Skin Cancer Alliance, AMSCA, was formed in 2012, having its genesis in the MRV Consumer Reference Group. It was originally conceived to be an Australian-wide consumer voice. However, it's evolved over time, and we are now considered the sector-wide voice for the leading consumer research and clinical organisations. And you can see we have 11 members, and I'm sure many of you will know the people or the organisations that are involved. Earlier this year, AMSCA published a consensus statement supporting a national targeted skin cancer screening program that Grant just touched on, and we presented it to government, and it's well worth a read, and we have copies just on the table over there if you'd like to pick one up at the end. So now we'll move into data collection that MRV, the team, have been looking at. Currently, data on discharged patients is limited, mainly due to the low response rates from their busy doctors. MRV has recently conducted a follow-up campaign with the GPs and the skin specialists whose patients have been discharged from the MRV melanoma clinics at Peter Mac, the Alfred, Border Oncology, the Olivia Newton-John Institute, and the Skin Health Institute. So this information is vital to enhance the accuracy and the value of our cohort data for quality melanoma research. And Grant actually just mentioned that the new staging guidelines are coming out next year and how important data is for those. So here's another example where having accurate data, even once the patient is discharged, is important. Now I'm going to present some more data, and I'd like to acknowledge Karen Winch for compiling the data that I'm about to present. So let's drill down. Early September, follow-up letters were emailed out to the doctors, and it was a one-page questionnaire asking about if their patient had subsequent melanomas, other skin cancers, their patient's general health. And from this summary, you can see how many letters were sent out, so 970, and how many were completed and returned as of yesterday. The response rate was not good, 21%, but as I mentioned earlier, this is likely due to the doctors working in busy practices and not having enough time. So here we have our, you can see how the GPs and skin specialists responded. Pleasingly, there was an increase compared to 2022. Unsurprisingly, most replied via hard copy as there was a return paid envelope, so it was made quite easy for them. But it's interesting because most practices, and I know this from my professional work, most practices remain cautious of using electronic means due to possible breaches of patient privacy. So we'll see where we move to in the next 5 to 10 years with that. Now, so to improve the future, what does that hold? So to improve this poor response rate, let's get it up past 21%. In future, MRV will directly send participants a link to complete a self-follow-up form around the anniversary that they joined MRV. And hopefully this will go live in 2025. This method of going directly to the patients has been quite successful in other studies with rare cancers, for example, and there was the cartwheel study, which I'm not overly familiar with, but it's worked quite well there. And our consumer reference group will be helping to develop some questions. In the last 12 months, have you had a new melanoma? If yes, where was it located? Have you progressed in the last 12 months? And are you having treatment? So finally, I'd like to say, here's a picture of the MRV team at the recent Australasian Melanoma Conference in Sydney. And a special thank you to Sonia, Christy and Karen for the work they do for MRV and for supporting our consumer reference group. Now, here we are, our big debate. And the statement tonight is, I can see Andrew's getting ready there. The statement tonight is there will be no longer a role for adjuvant therapy in melanoma. So just before I go on any further, if you have your smartphones ready, because Grant will be conducting a poll when the speakers have finished, that would be great. Now, I just want to clarify some terms here. Neoadjuvant therapy is before surgery. Perioperative therapy is before and after surgery. And the adjuvant therapy that's mentioned here is after surgery. So we have two distinguished speakers. And the first up is Associate Professor Andrew Haydon for the Affirmative. And I'll just let you, hang on, Andrew, I've got to let people know what you do. So he's a medical oncologist at the Alfred and a member of the Victorian Melanoma Service. Over the last 15 years, he has served as a principal investigator on numerous international trials for patients with advanced melanoma at the Alfred. He has co-authored over 100 peer-reviewed publications in high-impact journals and is also a member of the MRV Governance Committee. So welcome, Andrew, and a warning, Lavinia is a killer debater.
Good evening, everybody. This is my slide to start with.
And I do have a disclaimer here that this is a debate. I'm presenting deliberately some one-sided arguments here. We're looking into the future, and we're not trying to necessarily convince you that you have or haven't had the right treatment at all. And I think it's fair to say that all of the clinicians in the audience still prescribe adjuvant treatments. However, with that in mind, I'm going to try and convince you that in the future, at least, there'll be no role for adjuvant therapy. So as a background, adjuvant therapy is a systemic therapy that is given in addition usually to surgery, after surgery, to potentially improve the chance of that surgery being curative. It can be targeted therapies, immunotherapies, or radiotherapy, and at least for the point of today's debate, we're going to concentrate on immunotherapy and to a lesser degree targeted therapy. And these treatments attempt to eliminate micrometastatic disease. So this is microscopic amounts of cancer that may or may not be left behind after the surgery has been performed. And therefore, by definition, there'll be a number of proportion of patients that receive adjuvant therapy that actually would never have needed it, i.e. they have already been cured by the surgery themselves. And there's two ways that we can evaluate the effectiveness of an adjuvant treatment. And one is to really just ask the question, does that treatment prevent recurrence of the cancer? And the second question, or the second way that we can evaluate the effectiveness is whether or not it actually improves overall survival. And adjuvant therapy is something that as oncologists have been doing for many, many years in many, many different types of cancer. So this is not unique to melanoma. And as Alison has told you, neoadjuvant therapy really is talking about the same treatment, but given prior to surgery. So there is no doubt that adjuvant therapy clearly does reduce the risk of melanoma recurrence. There have been 3 large international studies that have addressed this issue, and all of these studies have shown significant reductions in the risk of recurrence. So the one on the study on the left is looking at targeted therapy compared to placebo. The one in the study in the middle was looking at adjuvant or postoperative pembrolizumab, again, compared to placebo. And on the right is nivolumab compared to ipilimumab. And these studies have shown quite clearly that adjuvant therapy nearly halves the risk of a melanoma recurrence. The pembrolizumab study in the middle is very important because this study actually had an inbuilt design in that it was asking the question of, do we need to give the therapy after surgery, or can we wait and give that therapy later to patients if and when they recur? And when we first saw this data, we were actually very excited. It was clearly practice changing, and we adopted adjuvant therapy in melanoma very quickly. And this was because we assumed that with such significant reductions in risk of recurrence, that this obviously is going to lead to an improvement in overall survival. And I would argue that the ultimate measure of success of an adjuvant treatment is that it can improve overall survival. I'm sure that that's what patients are most interested in. And if we had a treatment that prevented recurrence but caused a lot of toxic deaths, or more toxic deaths than preventing recurrences, no one would ever use a treatment like that. So what about overall survival in adjuvant therapy for melanoma? So the ipilimumab versus nivolumab study, which showed that nivolumab reduced recurrence on the left-hand side here, clearly shows absolutely no benefit insofar as improving overall survival is concerned. The targeted therapy study in BRAF mutant melanoma, which halved recurrence, has only made minor improvements in overall survival that in fact don't reach statistical significance. And as far as the pembrolizumab study is concerned, we've never seen any data presented with regards to overall survival from this study. And I can think of 3 possible reasons as to why we haven't seen that data. One is that no one's bothered to look at it because no one thinks it's important. The second would be that they have looked at it and they can see that there is a survival benefit, but they think that we should keep this a secret. And the third logical reason is that they have looked at it and in fact there's no survival benefit. And we've been told that this data will be presented when the study is 12 years old. And I wonder, Lavinia, do you know when the patent for pembrolizumab might run out?
I was too young.
So I'm sure that Lavinia is going to argue that preventing recurrence is certainly still better than nothing, even if there is no survival benefit. And perhaps that's true, but not if you've got treatments that cause significant toxicity. And remember, we are treating a number of patients that are already cured and would never have needed treatment. And immunotherapy is not without side effects. And some of these side effects can be long-term or even chronic. And unfortunately, occasionally they're fatal. Immunotherapy is expensive and it is time-consuming. This is treatment that takes a year for patients to be coming regularly to the centres for infusions. And we now even have data to say that immunotherapy reduces recurrence in stage 2 disease, where even more of these patients are already cured and don't need adjuvant therapy. So that risk-benefit ratio is even worse. So even if you think that preventing recurrence without improving survival is still a reasonable reason to give adjuvant therapy, then surely this data trumps all of that and makes a very clear argument in favour of neoadjuvant therapy as opposed to adjuvant therapy. So there are 2 randomised trials that have compared neoadjuvant treatment to a purely, or neoadjuvant plus adjuvant, to a purely adjuvant treatment. And these studies have shown really unequivocally that neoadjuvant therapy is far superior to adjuvant treatment. And I'm sure that no one would argue that adjuvant therapy is as good or better than neoadjuvant treatment. And we have moved on and we have adopted neoadjuvant treatment as clearly our preferred option. So in the clinic, if we have someone with stage 3 disease, because they've got lymph node involvement, there's 2 ways that can become apparent. The first is that they have clinically apparent stage 3 disease. So they have palpable lymph nodes or lymph nodes that you can see from staging investigations that are involved. And for these patients, I've just shown you that neoadjuvant therapy is clearly the best option. And so we shouldn't be giving adjuvant therapy to those patients. The other way that you can be diagnosed with lymph node involvement is by having a sentinel lymph node biopsy. And this sentinel lymph node biopsy shows microscopic amounts of melanoma in it. And most of those patients will be eligible for adjuvant therapy. But these patients need to be counselled that the adjuvant therapy is available. It will prevent or reduce the risk of recurrence, but it doesn't improve survival and it does have side effects. And therefore, if these patients are monitored closely, they're not given adjuvant therapy and treated if and when they recur, they're just as likely to be alive in 10 years' time with or without adjuvant therapy. And to be somewhat controversial, you could even argue that perhaps they're better off not even having the sentinel lymph node biopsy in the first place, because then if they don't and the melanoma does recur as a clinically obvious nodal recurrence, they'll then be eligible for neoadjuvant therapy, which is better than the adjuvant therapy that they could have got in the first place. And so I will finish there, hoping that I've convinced you all that adjuvant therapy will no longer be a standard treatment in the future for melanoma. And happy to answer some questions. Thanks.
Jules McNamara, would you like to ask a question, please?
Hi, Haydon, thanks very much for that.
Hold on.
Confused with that. I was starting to wonder, I guess, why, when you look at it like that, and we aren't having, it looked like statistically a big impact on survivorship we were talking about. So for, thank you. I'm not sure, but I'm assuming that for a lot of people, survivorship is pretty much up there in terms of importance. So is it better to have a look at, if there's no impact on, maybe not as much on survivorship, to look at not going for the adjuvant treatment and having a better quality of life? Would you have a better quality of life, less side effects and all the complications that come with that, and then leave, I guess, the treatment until there's a recurrence? And would that be a more effective way and less, I guess, toxic way of treating?
Yeah, I mean, super important question. And it really boils down to the toxicity of the treatment. So if you had a treatment that was non-toxic and nobody developed significant side effects and it didn't affect their quality of life, then I think it would be far more reasonable to give those patients a treatment that's going to reduce the risk of recurrence but ultimately not improve survival. But the problem here is that we are giving these treatments to patients that are potentially already cured and therefore are never ever going to need immunotherapy. And some of these treatment side effects can be permanent or at the very least long term. And so they could affect the quality of life of somebody who's never going to relapse and perhaps live for another 20 years with the side effects. The counter argument to that is that melanoma recurrence also affects quality of life, and the treatments that you need to have for the recurrence can affect quality of life. And so, you know, it is a balance. And that's why I said at the very start, you know, most of us still prescribe adjuvant therapies because we still see that there are some advantages to it. But I think that it's fair to say that the enthusiasm that we had for adjuvant therapy 5 years ago is nowhere near as high, or sorry, it's now nowhere near as high as it was 5 years ago.
I think the word I was looking for was that maybe being over-treated possibly, causing more. I was looking for now, I found that, are we being over-treated, which is actually causing maybe more issues long-term than the cancer itself, the actual treatment, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's hopefully the argument I was trying to make. Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, to talk about the flip side to what Andrew has discussed there, we now have Dr Lavinia Spain. She's a medical oncologist here at Peter Mac, specialising in melanoma. She has a strong interest in immune-related adverse events and has published extensively on the topic, including contributions to international guidelines. Currently, she serves as an invited member of the European Society for Melanoma Oncology, for Medical Oncology, ESMO, the Faculty of Tumour Immunology and Immunotherapy. Welcome, Lavinia.
Thanks so much, Alison, and thank you so much for the opportunity to present in this debate tonight. I congratulate Andrew on having less than 10 Kaplan-Meier curves in a medical oncology talk, so we're off to a good start already. So my job is to convince you that there will remain a role for adjuvant therapy in the treatment of melanoma, No one is here to talk about neoadjuvant therapy being less effective. It's clear neoadjuvant therapy is here to stay. But I'd just like you to hold on to the concept that there will be a role, perhaps in a smaller population, but that is the point of the debate tonight. We've gone through these definitions and I've sort of anchored you back to the premise of this debate, which I think is really important already. So in technology, there's this concept of the Gartner hype cycle, and I think it applies a bit to adjuvant therapy actually, where there's this technology trigger, or in our situation, a new therapy that came on through clinical trials about 10 years ago, or a bit less than that actually, which was very exciting and led to this peak of inflated expectations where we thought we would cure everybody because of the success in advanced disease. But we're probably now in this trough of disillusionment when we're realizing that actually we're not curing everybody. And as Andrew has so eloquently pointed out, perhaps we are over-treating. But I hope to convince you that really, I think we can jump back onto this slope of enlightenment for adjuvant therapy. So first of all, we've already seen these fantastic survival or event-free survival curves in favour clearly of neoadjuvant therapy, the blue line there at the top, adjuvant therapy at the bottom, in 2 randomised clinical trials, and nothing brings us more joy than seeing these fantastic results for our patients. Ooh. However, there is an important role still for adjuvant therapy. In the SWOG 1801 trial, pembrolizumab was continued after surgery, and in the NADINA trial, a proportion of patients who didn't respond as well as we wanted needed adjuvant therapy, and there remains particularly a role in that context. With neoadjuvant combination ipilimumab and nivolumab, on the left there in that red line, we see the patients that had more than 50% of viable tumour remaining after their treatment and their definitive surgery. Here on the right, in the more sort of current Prado study, those patients in the red over there ended up getting adjuvant treatment, and look what we see, a doubling, an improvement in the relapse-free survival from 35% to 71% with that adjuvant therapy component. Adjuvant therapy also increases the cure rate, and I've not said improves overall survival, but it increases the cure rate for patients with stage 2 and stage 3 melanoma. And in particular, that's important for those with the microscopic sentinel node disease, not the patients who are clearly eligible for neoadjuvant therapy where we can palpate or see the involved lymph nodes on imaging, but in those where it's really that primary tumour actually that's the main mass. And just to provide context on staging, stage 2 melanoma is just where that primary tumour involves the skin. And in stage 3, it's spread to the lymph nodes, either microscopic cells into that sentinel node, which we have to take out to appreciate under a microscope, or in a macroscopic or context where we can see it on scans. And I do apologise, I really have stuck to cutaneous or skin melanoma for the purpose of my talk today. In stage 2 melanoma, there's about a 10% benefit at 3 years in reducing the chance of relapse, and about 20% in stage 3 melanoma. And I think this is really important because when we're talking to people in clinic about the concept of adjuvant therapy, to do something now that might prevent a recurrence, and even if that recurrence may well be cured or managed with stronger doublet immunotherapy later on, psychologically, that's a very big deal to have relapse melanoma, and we can't predict where people are going to relapse. So there remains a very compelling argument, and it's an individualized discussion with people about having adjuvant therapy after their definitive surgery. I want to take you now on a slightly more scenic, conceptual, biologic side route as well, and make the case that particularly for those patients with stage 2 melanomas or stage 3 with microscopic sentinel node involvement, that there's a lot of information that can be gleaned from that primary tumour. And the more information we have, the better we can guide our adjuvant therapies. We've talked a lot about AI, the role of biomarkers, and I think we've got quite a lot we can discern. We tend to think about melanomas as all containing the same cells, like a bag of black M&Ms, all the same. But what we know in particular about primary tumours is that actually they can be very heterogeneous, more like a mixed bag of coloured M&Ms. And if we take just one sample and we've got different cells clustered in different places in a primary tumour, I thought Andrew might make the case that in earlier stages we could still embark on neoadjuvant therapy. We could take a sample of a primary and then give the drug therapy. But I'd make the case that we might have a strong sampling bias where we only sample some of the cells. And this heterogeneity exists on the level of the DNA, on the level of the proteins, and also on the level of the immune cell infiltration in these tumours. So to be able to resect the entire tumour, interrogate that with all of our improving technologies and biomarkers really should be giving us excellent information on exactly how we can personalise that adjuvant treatment. And that is most important, I think, in these stage 2 and microscopic sentinel node positive scenarios. The more information we have from that tumour resection, the less harm we will do. So Andrew rightly pointed out that in the stage 2 context, more than 50% of patients at 3 years, 61% had not even relapsed. So to achieve that 10% benefit, we are overtreating a number of patients, no doubt about that. And the number needed to treat for benefit in this study was actually 12 people for 1 to benefit. And we've talked, and I haven't gone into great detail about the possibility of life-altering and chronic side effects, which we can manage for the most part, but can really impact quality of life. So perhaps with more information, we can get that number needed to treat down to 1. And we are talking in a futuristic manner tonight in this debate. This is my favourite argument, actually, and I think the most compelling. The patients discussed in the MDM, the lump is already cut out. Now, what do we do? And here is the very pleased patient and the extremely happy team of surgeons. And here is the medical oncologist wishing that they had had the opportunity to perhaps deliver neoadjuvant therapy. And it's not an uncommon scenario, although education and forums such as this, patient advocacy for themselves is changing the game. So what do we do? Well, we can give adjuvant therapy. And so we've already seen in particular the benefit of that in the stage 3 population, so where it's melanoma involved lymph nodes, but also in the stage 4 context. If that lump is cut out, be that in the lung, be that at a site distant to the original tumour, we can see here, this was a lovely study conducted by a German group, randomising people to either receive placebo, single agent nivolumab, or combination ipi-nivo after resection of a stage 4 lesion, rendering them without disease evidence on scans. And clearly we can see placebos in the green. The recurrence rates were very high, whereas in the combination ipilimumab nivolumab arm in particular, fewer people relapsed, significantly so, and that translated into a benefit in terms of prolonged length of life. So coming back to this hype cycle, I've talked about perhaps in the wake of neoadjuvant success, being in this disillusioned state about adjuvant therapies. But I think there's hope for the future and that we can personalise and interrogate tumours better and really pick those who need adjuvant therapy better. And an extra plea, if I've not convinced your minds, I'm going for your hearts. I'm clearly the underdog in this debate. Professor Haydon is a member of Australia's melanoma glitterati and on a Nedjum Lancet scale completely eclipses me. So, hopefully you can sort of bear that in mind when you're voting. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lavinia, for seeing the underdog. I have a patient question from Jeff Lomdale at the back there. You might need a microphone, Jeff. Hold on.
Thank you. Let me start off by saying I'm always one for the underdog. So. And it's interesting that at the top of my little page of notes here, I said I had first do no or little harm. so anyway, there we go. Now, I've actually got 2 questions. One is, what protocols are there for putting patient on adjuvant therapy in the first place? If there is seems to be over-servicing, dare I mention it? That's the first one. And the second one is my understanding of melanoma treatment, cancer treatment is millimetre thin, but my understanding is that adjuvant therapy works with some cancer types and not others. Are there any opportunities to look at those where adjuvant therapy works with some cancer types and not others?
Yeah, so maybe to take your first question, Jeff, I think really this discussion about the adjuvant therapy is often a two-visit discussion now, where it depends on the risk of the melanoma recurrence, and particularly in stage 3 melanoma, where we've got macroscopic or lymph nodes seen on a scan, and now in the old days we used to take them out. Sometimes that may still happen. You know, the risk of relapse by 2 years is, you know, generally more than 50%. And so I think balanced against generally a side effect profile where we have about 10% of patients that develop severe side effects, but no doubt a greater number that develop some degree of side effect. And we know some of those can be chronic now and require, say, permanent hormone replacement lifelong. So I think it really comes down to a discussion with an individual about their health, their goals, their risk appetite, and their risk of recurrence, sort of factoring all together. And I think it's still more compelling in a stage 3 context than in a stage 2 context. I definitely concur with that, Andrew, there, but I think we owe that discussion and that transparency of availability to individuals. In terms of learning from other tumour types, I mean, I also treat kidney cancer, and the adjuvant therapy debate there has been extremely contentious. So are there different ways that we can learn, I think, from other tumour types, I think is sort of your question. I think melanoma, what has, I guess, in a way impaired the benefit of adjuvant therapy is actually the fantastic immune treatment options that we have that work in later stage disease and in those combination therapies. But they do come with a higher risk of side effects and toxicity for people, as well as living with a diagnosis of stage 4 melanoma too. So I think, you know, we've almost sort of, that's the Achilles heel of all these survival scenarios, is the excellent treatments we now have, which is a fantastic thing. And I think we just have to keep moving the field forward and learning more about the biology and understanding individuals' host factors as well as treatment factors, and how we can get that jigsaw puzzle correctly together.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to have the poll, and Grant's going to set us up for it. Get your smartphones ready.
Okay, yes, please, everyone online and in the room, grab your mobile devices, and we're going to have a vote on the outcomes from the debate. So how to join, you can use the QR code. You can log into the web at thepolev.com/myname, or you can even do a text message. That's a bit complicated. I tried it out today and it doesn't work so well. So, so I suggest the QR code is probably the easiest. You'll get something about registering. Just click skip. Don't you love the way now whenever you sign up for anything, they want to collect your details and register, but if you just click skip, it'll get you to the question, and we'll see how we're going. And wouldn't you know, Lavinia ahead, but there's plenty of opportunity for a comeback. All right, it's looking a bit one-sided. Sorry, Andrew. Yep. Maybe if we'd said in 20 years or something, you know, you would have won hands down. But I think we do have a winner that, in fact, we think there will be a role for adjuvant therapy in melanoma in the future. But I thought that was an excellent debate. Really want to thank Jules and Jeff for their superb questions. I really enjoy that perspective that our experts by experience bring to these type of debates, and huge thanks to Andrew and Lavinia. So please join me in thanking them. Okay, so So now to the highlight of our scientific exchange, which is the Morgan Mansell Award. And I hand over to Mark Shackleton to chair this part of the evening. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks very much, Grant, and it's a real pleasure to be able to once again introduce this prize, which has become a real feature of our Victorian melanoma research landscape. So by way of brief background, Morgan unfortunately died from melanoma in her 20s, was a patient looked after by several of the clinical groups across town. She was a remarkable young woman in many ways, not only having a remarkably complex series of medical problems that she had to deal with for many, many years, and which were eventually further complicated by the nature of her melanoma, but also remarkable in her really ability to engage the world, despite what she was going through, her ability to engage the world and think even beyond her own predicament. And was very active on in advocacy and on social media in stressing the importance of seeking help and skin cancer prevention and many important causes that she was very active in supporting. One of those was additionally a focus on the importance of supporting research. And it's in the spirit of that that her parents, Peter and Julie over there, who we thank you very much for coming along again tonight, decided to develop an award in her name and in the honour of her memory, which focuses on rewarding or acknowledging early career researchers within our community, at least here in Victoria, who have contributed substantially, at least sometime in the previous, I think it's 3 years is the overall criteria, significant research which is impacting our field. It's really important for early career researchers as they are encouraged to continue a career in research, which is often not easy, to have the opportunity to apply for and receive such awards. It's a great encouragement for them. And in fact, important overall in their ability to develop their careers towards research independence. So it's a tremendous initiative, and it's fantastic that it's now become part of the just sort of regular landscape of our annual program now. So it's my honour to introduce the 3 finalists. So the process is that our researchers submit applications for the award. The criteria have to be early career researchers to have made or produced impactful research in melanoma at some stage in the last 3 years. But it can be from a whole diverse range of fields: laboratory science, clinical science, all sorts of different types of research. And so this year's there's an evaluation committee that assess the applications based on the agreed criteria, and then essentially decide who are the finalists. So tonight's finalists, I want to announce them that we're going to hear from very shortly in terms of their research. Julia Lai-Kwon from a medical oncologist from Peter Mac. Cristina Vico-Alonso, a dermatologist from the Victorian Melanoma Service at the Alfred, and Ibukun Oloruntoba, a melanoma researcher at Monash University. And it really actually struck me the fact that, which I think is a really important aspect of our Victorian melanoma research community, is that those researchers are all early career, of course, but they're all doing their research in different precincts. And I think therefore represent a diversity of contributions to the melanoma research effort that is really very much a Victorian characteristic, and really enabled as a result of the Melanoma Research Victoria program, which looks at applications to support research, really no matter where they come from. where the group just looks to support the best research with the resources that it has. And the fact that we've got 3 finalists to present here from diverse locations across Victoria is, I think, a really important feature of this year's program. So now the presentations tonight, I think that 2 of the finalists are not actually physically here.
Recorded, yep.
Oh, they're recorded, are they? I thought they were going to be, I thought they were maybe going to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and make their presentations.
Yeah, they had better tech in Harvard, I think, from where our finalists are this evening.
So Julia, I'm told, is currently in Korea, is that right, Sonia? And so she's our first presenter, and she has pre-recorded her presentation.
Yeah. Put my glasses on. All right, button.
Grant's always very impressive, not only his general abilities.
Hi, my name is Dr. Julia Lai-Kwon.
Fantastic
I'm
IT
a
skills
medical
as well.
oncologist at Peter Mac and a PhD candidate at the Department of Health Services Research at Peter Mac and the University of Melbourne. Firstly, apologies for not being able to attend today's MRV Scientific Exchange in person as I'm currently overseas. But today I'll be providing a brief overview of my program of research over the past 2 years, which is aimed to understand the impact of immunotherapies and targeted therapies on the quality of life of people living with stage 3 and 4 melanoma. So why is it important to understand the quality of life implications of novel therapies in stage 3 and 4 melanoma? Well, we know that these novel therapies have significantly improved disease outcomes in patients with stage 3 and 4 melanoma. And so now there is an increasing focus on maintaining and improving their quality of life. Health-related quality of life encompasses 4 components: cancer-related symptoms, treatment-related side effects, functioning, and global quality of life. Understanding the impact of systemic therapy on health-related quality of life is important both before, during, and after treatment. Before treatment, it can help inform shared decision-making about the pros and cons of therapy. And during and after treatment, it's important for screening and addressing supportive care needs. My program of research sought to address 3 questions. The first was, what is the quality of life issues do people living with stage 3 and 4 melanoma experience? And to do this, we undertook 2 pieces of work. The first was a mixed method systematic review of the impact of immune checkpoint inhibitors and targeted therapy on the health-related quality of life of people with stage 3 and 4 melanoma. The second was a real-world study utilising data from the Melanoma Research Victoria database, as well as a database at the Netherlands Cancer Institute, to understand the health-related quality of life outcomes of people with resected stage 3 melanoma and 4 melanoma treated with adjuvant anti-PD-1 therapy. The second question was, how can we improve the measurement of quality of life issues in this patient group? And this led to the development of a new survey to assess quality of life in patients with stage 3 and 4 melanoma treated with novel therapies, the EORTC Advanced Melanoma module. The third question was, what supportive care advice can be provided to people with stage 3 and 4 melanoma? And this led to the development of the updated Australian Melanoma Management Guidelines on supportive care and survivorship. But what quality of life issues did we find? Well, we found that patients experience a variety of physical, psychological, and social issues during and after treatment. This includes chronic toxicities of therapy, such as fatigue, insomnia, rashes, and arthralgias, psychological issues such as prognostic uncertainty and fear of cancer recurrence, and social issues like difficulties returning to work and financial toxicity. In our real-world study of people receiving adjuvant anti-PD-1 therapy, on a per-patient analysis, we found that a significant proportion of people reported a clinically significant deterioration in their emotional and social functioning at 1 year following adjuvant therapy compared to baseline, and that's shown in the 2 graphs that you can see on this slide in red. We also found that younger patients were at increased risk of a reduction in role and social functioning at 1 year compared to baseline. This work helps us to inform the selection of targets for proactive screening, ideally using patient-reported outcome measures or PROMs, and supportive care interventions in this patient population. It also really highlighted the value of conducting a more detailed per-patient analysis rather than just a group-level analysis of health-related quality of life data in clinical trials. Our second question was, how can we improve the measurement of quality of life issues in this patient group? We found that current patient-reported outcome measures do not adequately measure the issues that are important to patients with stage 3 and 4 melanoma treated with novel therapies. And so this led to the development of a new module, the EORTC Advanced Melanoma module, which is a new service specifically designed for measuring quality of life issues in this patient group. We intend that this module will be used as part of clinical trials as well as in routine care. It includes the perspectives of Australian patients and healthcare professionals, and is currently in phase 3 of development. And you can see an outline of the first page of our provisional module on the slide. We hope that this module will eventually enable more accurate and thorough assessment of the issues associated with immunotherapy and targeted therapy in clinical trials as well as routine care. And this will eventually form part of the EORT suite of patient-reported outcome measures, which is the most commonly used suite internationally for assessing quality of life in cancer clinical trials. The third question was, what supportive care advice can be provided to people living with stage 3 and 4 melanoma? In conjunction with my co-authors and co-led by Dr Iris Bartula, we developed healthcare professional guidelines with evidence-based recommendations around the management of physical and psychological concerns in people living with stage 3 and 4 melanoma. And these guidelines are currently under review, but eventually will be available via the Cancer Council Australia website. We hope that this will provide clinicians with ready access to evidence-based guidelines for the management of common physical and psychological concerns in this patient group. We did also find a number of gaps where there wasn't any, where we were unable to make any evidence-based recommendations, and hopefully this will form priorities for future supportive care research in this patient group. Finally, I'd like to thank our collaborators, the EORTC Quality of Life Group and the Netherlands Cancer Institute, which really led the development of the EORTC Advanced Melanoma module, as well as Melanoma Research Victoria for providing us with access to their data. Thanks very much.
Next one. Yeah. So obviously got no chance for questions unless Grant's IT skills are even greater than I think they already are. So we should just ready to click on that. So our next presenter is Cristina Vico-Alonso.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to present our study on early detection of melanomas using circulating tumor-specific antibodies. Early detection of melanoma is crucial but still challenging due to a wide range of different clinical presentations. There's an increase in melanoma in situ diagnosis without a reduction in invasive melanoma cases. So there's a need to identify biologically significant skin lesions. And additionally, there might be a decorrelation between clinical and histopathological features. So there is a gaining interest in identifying biomarkers to help diagnose melanoma in the very early stages of the disease. As we all know, melanoma has a high mutation rate, leading to the generation of tumor antigens that trigger a cognate cellular and humoral immune response. That's a family of proteins named the cancer testis antigens family. And this is a group that comprises over 90 structurally and functionally unrelated proteins that can be aberrantly expressed in melanoma. The cancer testis antigens are normally expressed in immune privileged sites like the testis. So when these antigens are detected somewhere else, the immune system can initiate a humoral response against these antigens. These antibodies these antibodies could serve then as diagnostic biomarkers and potentially prognostic. The main objectives of these studies are to identify circulating antibodies that might be generated in early stage of melanoma patients and compare these to patients without melanoma, to validate if circulating antibodies can reliably be detected using a custom protein array, and to look into the use of this protein array in a real-world setting. So for this purpose, we included 2 distinct patient cohorts. Cohort 1 included plasma samples from 199 stage 1 and 2 melanoma patients, and compared these to completely healthy donors. And cohort 2 comprised 71 melanoma in situ, stage 1 and 2 melanoma patients, collected via ASMIT and the Alfred Hospital, and we compare these to 32 healthy donors from the same sources. So the results for cohort 1 were these 3 top antigen specificities were identified with IUC values ranging from 0.86 to 0.98 in the discovery cohort. And same 3 top antigens were identified in the internal validation cohort. Of the 3 identified markers, one showed an IUC value of 0.98 in the discovery cohort, as you can see, and 0.98 in the validation cohort. These candidate biomarkers were then tested in a real-world cohort of melanoma patients and healthy individuals. And in this context, the univariate analysis of all antigens identified 9 top tumor antigen specificities ranging from 0.62 to 0.68. So these individual IUC values were far lower than what we saw in our prior melanoma cohort. However, the combi-ROC analysis, the multivariate ROC analysis using the top 9 tumor antigen specificities, identified a signature of 7 antigens with IUC of 0.90. And while this isn't as high as the prior cohort, this is still considered a good IUC for a diagnostic test. So these are our conclusions. Circulating tumor-specific IgG antibodies were identified in melanoma situ, stage 1 and 2 melanoma plasma samples compared to a population of healthy donors. Lower sensitivity and specificity were observed in a real-world cohort, and compounding factors may have contributed to the lower performance. And the inclusion of clinical or complementary parameters may further improve performance. And of course, future research would be necessary to validate our findings and incorporate them into the clinical practice. Thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed the session. Thank you.
Okay, again, no questions. So we'll move on to our last. How much does that grant? We'll move on to our last presenter, Ibukun, who I think is going to present face-to-face in 3 dimensions. Now, Sonia, do I just advance this?
Yeah, she just advanced that.
Thank you very much for having me today. Yes, my name's Ibukun Oloruntoba. I was a final year MD PhD student, just graduated a week ago, so happy about that. And I was conferred a few months ago, so ready for the real world. So my PhD looked at artificial intelligence in dermatology, looking at the novel approaches to diagnosing and classifying skin lesions. And one of our projects, we looked at AI-based software and how accessible they were, especially online, so Apple Store and Google Store and things like that, but I'll get into it. So in dermatology, AI technology has rapidly advanced, reaching performance levels comparable to dermatologists in the experimental setting. This has fueled commercialization, making AI tools for skin cancer diagnosis and monitoring widely available to the public, especially through mobile applications. However, regulatory bodies like the FDA and the TGA have noted a lack of guidance around labeling for these AI models. To address this gap, the TGA asked us to assess current labeling practices for dermatology AI mobile applications and to recommend standards to ensure safer, more effective use in Australia. So we began with a literature search to identify existing labeling standards and guidelines for AI-based software as a medical device, or SAMD, across various medical fields. Out of the 200 articles identified, only 10 discussed labeling specific to AI-based medical devices. These included 2 articles focused on dermatology, radiology, 1 on ophthalmology, and the remaining 5 provided general recommendations for AI medical labeling. Next, we examined mobile applications available in Australia's Apple Store and Google Play Store from May to June 2023. Using search terms like artificial intelligence, mole, melanoma, and skin cancer, we identified 15 relevant applications in the Apple Store and 12 in the Google Store, totaling a total number of 21 AI-based medical devices or applications. Now, our results highlight 2 key findings. Firstly, from the literature review, we identified common labeling recommendations for AI-based medical devices. The extract of our table here shows some of the articles we assessed. These were the key criteria identified as essential for labeling guidelines: intended use, training and test data, performance metrics, and limitations of AI. So essentially, why are we using, for intended use, why are we using the AI models? For training and testing data, what were the AI models trained on, the populations, how many numbers, how many images, what types of images, what types of skin cancers, etc. Performance metrics, how is the creator of the app, how are they measuring the performance of the AI models? And lastly, what are the limitations that they have identified within their models? All 10 articles emphasize the importance of providing intended use of the application and the training and test data details of the app's AI, while the majority of articles highlighted the need to provide information about the limitations and performances measured of the AI-based medical devices. Secondly, using these synthesized guidelines, we evaluated the 21 dermatology AI apps available in Australia. An extract of Table 2 from our manuscript shows how we achieved this. While all apps provided details or information on intended use, many lacked accessible data on skin type diversity in training sets or explanations of performance metrics. Only 6 apps referenced research articles, and some studies were behind paywalls, limiting transparency. Our review of 21 dermatology AI apps available in Australia found that none fully adhered to the labeling guidelines we synthesized, leaving significant gaps in transparency. The lack of regulation is particularly concerning for public-facing apps, as missing or unclear information on performance and limitations could lead to inaccurate assessments, ultimately posing risk for users who rely on these tools for health decisions. It has been acknowledged that currently manufacturers do not provide enough information when labeling their AI devices, and that guidelines must be established to ensure transparency. Our research underscored the need for standardized labeling requirements for AI-based dermatology medical devices, and initiated important conversations with the TGA regarding future regulation standards. It has also laid the groundwork for our Delphi study and consensus statement on essential labeling guidelines developed with the input from dermatologists from the Australasian College of Dermatology and the Digital Health Committee. Together, these efforts aim to create reliable labeling standards for safer AI integration in dermatology. Thank you very much for your time.
Ibukun, I'm going to actually get you to stay here. So anyone got any questions for Ibukun? It's part of your training. Gary?
Sorry, how do I address you?
Oh, Ibukun or book.
Book.
Yes.
Thanks, book. Sitting here, I'm a career insurance person. So what came to mind for me was this sounds fantastic. If you wherever you take it, put another overlay into it to include insurers, because what you're saying, because it's unregulated, there's no consistency. There's a possibility that maybe some people go and make decisions about treatment, etc. Whereas with an insurer overlay, I think there'd be a clearer understanding of what the outcome of the apps are actually trying to say. That's a suggestion.
No, thank you. Yes, it's regulation of AI is such a complicated issue. We can look at it from the doctor's perspective, you can look at it from the patient's perspective, you can look at it from insurance or a hospital perspective, and also organizations who are more commercial based. At the moment, it is a bit of a free-for-all. So there are some applications that we assessed where their training, they hadn't updated the app since 2020, and you'd have to pay for it. And if you're part of the public, or even a clinician, without really looking into like the details of the app, you could easily just purchase that app and have access to an application where you don't know how many lesions it's been trained on, what population, and where it's coming from. So yes, I feel there's so many things to do. This is just scratching the surface. And the TGA is, I think they're supposed to release it a couple of days ago, but maybe it's coming soon. They're releasing their new updated standards. So unless I've missed it, I might have. So, but yeah, thank you for that question.
Well, there's another question, Book. They're lining up.
Thank you.
So my question is,
I'm sorry. I'll start a great presentation, Book, once again. So my question is around what exactly are you looking while making this labeling guidelines? Like, as in, are you looking for the diagnostic accuracy, or are you looking for whether the data that, like the images that a patient is taking, or maybe a dermatologist is it transparent, or is it a federated learning algorithm for the data diagnostics? What is of primary relevance in the guidelines, and what is more important for the TGA when, as compared to the SAMD, software as medical device?
I can't talk for the TGA, but from my opinion, the things that we were looking for, or I was looking for, that was really, I was very interested in, was firstly the amount of images that the AI model was trained on. the population, if they mentioned the population and the skin types that they were trained on. At the moment, most AI models are trained on fairer skin types. So studies have shown poorer performances on skin of color. So on top of that, looking at how they measured or claimed to measure their the performances of the models. And I feel something that was really important for me also was this model backed by research? Or was it just someone that put something together and put it online? Most of the time it was the latter. They just had something online. And then when we did have models that were backed or apps that were backed by research, it was really hard to access unless you had institutional access, or sometimes you have to pay for it. So I'd always put myself in the position of someone in the public that was trying to get more information about the apps that they were using, or even junior doctors who sometimes won't have the institutional access that they used to have when they were in university. So these are the main things I was looking for, that I, just some of my personal biases that I was looking for when looking through these applications.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Just a really quick one. Thinking about the real world implications, if you do go to the TGA and they do change guidelines, what happens to those apps that are out there at the moment? Do you know will they remain out there, or?
That's a really good question. I don't know how the TGA is going to approach it. I think I'm too junior for those meetings. But in an ideal world, I feel those apps should be taken down. I feel all apps should be taken down, and then we should start from the start. So once we have very strict, or find the balance between strict but also fair guidelines, then if the TGA has maybe a committee that assesses these applications, and then they're able to go back online. But at the moment, there are only 2 TGA properly approved AI models, dermatology-based AI models, but then there are, like I said, 21 applications that use AI available to the public. So yes, we'll see what they do.
Well done, Book. I'm going to. That was harder than your thesis defence, I think. So you've done extremely well. Could everyone just again join me in thanking the speakers and the finalists for this year's Morgan Mansell Prize, representing not only a diversity of locations of the research, but also diversity of topics, which I think is another real feature of the award. And that diversity, don't underestimate how important that diversity is. I often reflect on the fact that growing up in the field, learning the sort of my oncology trade in the 1990s, I often reflect on the fact that the vast majority of people in mainstream cancer research at that time thought that immunotherapy, that investing research in immunotherapy was a waste of time. And it was only the sort of diversity of research activity across the world, including then actually very small pockets of research across the world focused on tumour immunology and immunotherapy, that resulted in the chances and in the treatments that we have today. So fostering diversity, I think, is a really important feature of our field generally, and something that I think MRV is certainly proud to support within the Victorian community. Take a seat. Thanks. Well done. Okay, so this is what they've been battling for up here for the last half hour or so. I can't show you it because it's actually got the winner's name on it already, so it'll be a bit of a giveaway. But I guess in that context, then I'll be going to announce the winner. So I'm very pleased and proud to announce that the winner of the 2024 Morgan Mansell Prize as the Young Victorian Melanoma Researcher of the Year is Dr Julia Lai-Kwon. Well done, Julia. So we've got a book in the audience. I'm told that Cristina is actually also online somewhere out there can vaguely hear this, but no one knows where Julia is. So apparently last seen in Korea and not answering messages. So we assume that she's okay or travelling, and that she'll be back safely soon and receive her award, which is a really nice plaque. It's a beautiful looking thing, and also comes with a cash surprise. So to Peter and Julie, thank you very much again for supporting this award. So I'll now hand back to Grant to finish this off. And while he's coming to the stage, I'd actually like everyone to thank and acknowledge Grant. I know he's probably going to acknowledge a lot of other people now, but you know, he's led this association now for, it must be close to 15 years, and you know, I think a lot of the great work that you've seen over the years and even today really is a consequence of his effort and energy and commitment to supporting the Melanoma Research Victoria group. So thanks very much, Grant.
Thanks, Mark. I think that was unnecessary, really, because Melanoma Research Victoria is an absolute team effort, which I think you've appreciated tonight. And you know, first of all, just some thank yous. Thank you to all the Melanoma Research Victoria participants, almost 4,000 people have generously shared their personal medical information and their tumour tissue and their blood. You know, Christina's study was blood donated by Melanoma Research Victoria patients, and it's a collaborative effort in research focused on the participants to benefit current and future patients with melanoma and potentially prevent melanoma as well. So thank you very much to our participants. Huge thank you to the Melanoma Research Victoria team, to Sonia and Karen and Christy for all the effort you put in to make Melanoma Research Victoria happen, and for tonight, and which has been, you know, another wonderful expose of absolute cutting edge science. I mean, you know, AI is the thing in biology and medicine at the moment, and I think you've had a really good taste of that. And for those that are a bit quantitative minded, we saw rock curves and AUCs of 0.6 up to the high 0.90s, all very good quality work done trying to predict what's going to happen to people with melanoma. So it's been really interesting this evening. Just one, before I get to the prizes for everyone that's attended tonight, I do want to acknowledge the collaborative efforts across the whole state. Mark referred to this, that Victoria is actually a special place, one of the leading jurisdictions in the world for medical research, including melanoma research. And it's actually the collaborative efforts. You know, we're not, you know, we don't have 280 million people like the, plus like the US or Europe to come together to do research or to be the basis of research. But here, you know, we come together, multiple institutions right across the state, to come together for the benefit of melanoma patients. So I just want to acknowledge all the participating centres and the leadership, including our wonderful consumer research group that you heard about earlier this evening. So very final thing, the prizes for everyone that's attending tonight, and acknowledge the participation of people online. But you can pick up one of those wonderful tents, cabanas, to take home with you this evening. And we would like to get, you know, a photo of people holding up their boxes with the tents in it. This was actually, these tents were donated by the family of one of the Melanoma Research Victoria participants. So it's very special to be able to share that, and for us all, thank you, to individually promote some smart behaviour with these particular tents. So please come and grab one, and then wait for a photo, because we want to get the photo of people holding up their tents. So thanks everyone for your participation.